And good morning again. Senator Durbin is in Springfield, Illinois. This morning, Senator McCain is with us in the studio, and we're going to begin here. Senator McCain, just in case there were not enough news for us to deal with, now an audio tape of Osama bin Laden has popped up overnight claiming responsibility for the Christmas bomber and promising more such attacks. You were very critical last week of how this whole Christmas bomber deal has been handled by the government. Are you satisfied that the government is doing enough on this?
Well, I think that the events of last week and the way it was handled proved that there were significant errors made, both in anticipating the Christmas bomber and putting together all the information that was obviously there. But the Osama bin Laden tape, I'm sure indicates that Osama bin Laden is still a motivating force for jihadist Islamic extremists throughout the world. And so we have to stay after him. But any chance of finding out Osama bin Laden's connection with this bombing vanished when the decision was made without consulting any of our intelligence heads by apparently the Justice Department, with directions to low level of the FBI to give this individual a trial in civil court, which then gave him his Miranda rights, and he was lawyered up. He was cooperating until he got a lawyer. Now that makes it almost impossible for us to pursue the leads that the Christmas bomber might have. That to me is unbelievable.
As yet, the government has reviewed this, but we haven't seen anyone who's been held accountable yet.
No, no one has been held responsible. Apparently, it may be, unfortunately, the old Washington game, not invented with this administration. We're all responsible, so no one is responsible. The American people expect us to hold people accountable, and I intend, as a member of the Homeland Security Committee, to see if we can't continue to find out who was responsible and hold them accountable.
Should they be dismissed, fired? Should heads roll here?
I think that, as the President said, there's responsibility. There was a failure, and as soon as we find out the depth of those failures, obviously I think there should be changes made. Otherwise, we really are not addressing the personnel side of it. The other side of it is we ought to look at what we've done with the reorganization of government and the creation of massive new bureaucracies, and whether we've actually improved our ability to stop these attacks from taking place.
Do you think creating the Department of Homeland Security on reflection was a good idea, or was it just another level of bureaucracy?
I think the 9/11 Commission clearly concluded, and I agreed with them, that there had to be a consolidation of intelligence assets and greater cooperation and sharing amongst the various agencies. Now, whether the creation of that department has achieved that goal or not is, in light of recent events, is not absolutely clear.
Senator, a lot of unforeseen opposition suddenly cropped up last week to the confirmation of Ben Bernanke to be the chairman of the Federal Reserve. I now count some 10 senators, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, who say they're going to vote against him. Are you going to vote for him or against him?
I'm very skeptical about his nomination. I'm worried that if his nomination is turned down, the effect that it might have. But the fact is that Chairman Bernanke was in charge when we hit the iceberg, and his policies were partially responsible for the meltdown that we experienced. I think that he should be held accountable.
Well, do you think he should withdraw his nomination?
No, I don't know, because again,
well, I mean, are you going to vote against him, or you're just concerned about it?
I'm both concerned and leaning against.
Leaning against,
yes.
Voting for him. Let's talk about this Supreme Court ruling this week, which really blew the lid off putting limits on money in politics. You've been a leader in trying to limit the impact of money in politics. Now we're seeing a Supreme Court ruling that says corporations can just go right in there. If somebody comes out, for example, against Wall Street bonuses, a corporation can say, buddy, you're doing it at your own risk because we're going to buy some attack ads and run them against you. What do you plan? Do you plan to do anything in response to this?
I don't think there's much that can be done, to tell you the truth, Bob. I was not surprised at the Supreme Court decision. I went over to observe the oral arguments. It was clear that Justice Roberts, Alito, and Scalia, by their very skeptical and even sarcastic comments, were very much opposed to BICRA. I think that it was interesting that they have had no experience in the political arena. I was reminded of the story of Lyndon Johnson when he was vice president, was told about President Kennedy's appointments of all these brilliant people, and he said, you know, I wish one of them had run for county sheriff. We're going to see now an inundation of special interest money into political campaigns. I think that diminishes the influence of average citizens. And by the way, I would point out that both Justice Rehnquist and Justice O'Connor, who had taken a different position on this issue, both had significant political experience. Justices Roberts, Alito, and Scalia have none, but it is what it is.
So you're not intending to try to introduce any legislation. You just don't think it's possible now.
The Supreme Court has spoken on an issue of on a constitutional basis.
But reform is dead.
Oh, I think so. I think that there's going to be, over time, a backlash, because when you see the amounts of union and corporate money that's going to go into political campaigns, but in the short term, the Supreme Court has spoken. I respect their decision.
Well, we had this thunderbolt in Massachusetts where a Republican gets elected to Ted Kennedy's seat. I think it's fair to say that it has stalled the drive toward health care reform in the Senate. The Democrats no longer, for one thing, have enough votes to filibuster health care. Where do you think this ought to go now? What should Republicans do in response to this?
Do what we've done and say we'd be willing to sit down and start over from the beginning. With genuine negotiations, there are things we can agree on, whether it be medical malpractice reform or whether it be across state lines, people can purchase insurance policies that suits them best, outcome-based treatment, even to refundable tax credits for people to be able to purchase health insurance on their own. There are many things we could do. But we also have to reject this process. People in my state are as angry about the process of bribery and extortion. The Louisiana Purchase, the Cornhusker kickback, all of these unsavory deals that were made behind closed doors. This is a president who promised to have it on C-SPAN, and now they did all these deals that are at the expense of other states.
Do you think you could get other Republicans to sit down at a table with Democrats and say, look, let's just go over what we can agree on here and then go out and pass that and let that be a starter?
As long as we start from the beginning. But we categorically reject much of what the Democrats have passed on a party line vote continuously.
I want to ask you one other question about Guantanamo. You and the president agreed it ought to be closed. The deadline he set for closing it came and went last week. What do you do now? Should it still be closed?
Yes, but you have to have developed a policy to address the issues, particularly the enemy combatants who must be kept and can't be released, and what you do with them. In other words, the president's mistake was announcing the closure within a year without having all the policies in place to achieve that. So Guantanamo Bay must remain open until such time as we have a coherent, comprehensive policy addressing the detainees, and many of them cannot be released, especially to some of the countries that they've been released to and they've gone back into the fight.
John McCain, thank you so much.
We
asked for some news this